Welcome, welcome. Today may sound a little bit different. If you are new to me, it probably doesn't sound different because I am new. And if that's the case, welcome, welcome. I can't wait for you to hear what is next. And if you are returning, this will sound different. First of all, thank you so much for returning because I'm recording this outside. I'm recording this in the mountains. I have this beautiful, beautiful landscape behind me. God knows if the internet is going to hold out, but so far so good. And I'm recording this using my AirPods. And the reason why is because today we're going to be talking about my experience with psychedelic assisted therapy. And the reason why I'm sharing something so deeply personal and something that I've really grappled with is this what I really want to share? But this particular journey was not the most pleasant. I should say it was more intense than it was pleasant. And the reason why I decided to share it is because what I know is that when I am struggling with something pretty profound, it's become very apparent to me that I am not alone. And there are so many people that I look up to, that I respect, that I care deeply about, that when they share their kind of personal stories, it almost gives me permission to say, me too. And that is why I'm doing this, because I want you, I'm hoping that if you do hear yourself in me or feel like you know somebody that may relate to this, that it may help unlock something for you and maybe not feel so alone. So I'll give you a little bit of backdrop here. It was not my first time doing psychedelic assisted therapy. I've actually done it a couple of times before, all with assistance, meaning I've had people kind of facilitate an experience for me. A background on me, I am not somebody who likes to be out of control ever. And what that means is that I don't really drink. Generally speaking, I don't do drugs. Even in college, I didn't even do mushrooms or anything like that with lava lamps because I have always, kind of maintained some sense of control, which has, I don't know, has been an issue, I guess. And where I was going in with this particular journey, I've documented my psychedelic assisted experiences before on this podcast. I will link them in the show notes if you're interested in going back, because they were insanely visceral, as well as illuminating. Illuminating is a good word. And over the course of the past couple of years, what I have noticed about the psychedelic assisted world, or psychedelic world of psychedelics in terms of therapy, is that there are so many incredible benefits that what I've been told, and reading through the research and understanding more from people that have been studying this for so long, is that it can reverse disease in some case. It can eliminate or reduce depression, anxiety, disorders, mental disorders, and offer some relief from it. And it has been proven again and again and again. But I will give you some caution. I'm not telling you to go out and do it. I'm telling you, if you are interested, feel free to listen and kind of be a voyeur on my experience. But talk to your doctor, or make an informed decision on those things, and make sure, out of anything you hear today, make sure that the people, if you are looking to other people to help facilitate an experience, please make sure that they are giving you the power, and not interpreting or manipulating the experience in any way. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I've learned a lot over this experience and have gotten tangled up with people in the past, or have had experience with people in the past that were not what they appeared to be. And so certainly exercise with caution. So one of the things that I have noticed, at least for me, um, recently, is that I feel like I come across the same kind of, I don't know if it's limiting beliefs, but as I continue to progress in my world, and I'm somebody who deeply cares about personal development and learning. Obviously, I'm continuously um, studying and figuring out how to live life better. This whole podcast is dedicated to the art of reinvention and identifying yourself and kind of shedding those old skin so that you can get into the one that feels the most aligned for you and kind of live your best life. So generally, I love to find people and experts that are kind of breaking status quo, because usually what that looks like when you are in a world where you feel like maybe you have outgrown your container, like nothing's wrong with you, nothing is broken. It's something I deeply believe, that you don't come to this podcast broken or that something is wrong with you, but that you've outgrown where you are. And if you've outgrown where you are, what does it look like when you have more space? And so there is a lot of tension and friction that happens on those edges, right? Especially when you're kind of cramped and you're like, this no longer fits. And so I've been feeling like that a lot. And more background on me. This is going to be a really off the cuff interview. This is going to be a really off the cuff conversation with you. And I appreciate you being with me here, because this was really an intense experience I was not expecting. And I think the message of what came out of it became really, really clear. So I had been, oh, I had left my corporate job 3 years ago. I had been in corporate sales, technology sales, for over 20 years. And I left 3 years ago on account of profound burnout. I left on purpose without a plan. I don't recommend the approach. It's been a wild road. And once I left, I started to explore and take this time in this new freedom to explore and essentially do a bunch of crazy stuff. And um, part of the crazy stuff was psychedelic assisted therapy, or doing solo overnight hikes, and scaling the tallest mountain solo, and doing endurance challenges. I found out I love endurance challenges, which has been very exciting. And in the process, I had started to build a coaching practice where I've been helping predominantly women go through massive transitions. And usually people that have kind of experienced some type of burnout, that, Rory Vaden will say, who is the co-founder of Brand Builders Group, he always says, you are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. And so I'll let that breathe for a minute, because I think it's so interesting to know that a lot of times we ask ourselves, how can we serve? And usually it is serving our younger self, right? Or our former self, of how can we help people get further along and know that they are not alone. So I had built a whole coaching practice and had done masterminds and retreats, and had uh, done private coaching and group coaching and all of those things. And in between all of that, I started to realize I really, really love coaching. But when it came to identifying myself as a coach, I really came up with a lot of resistance. And resistance in, I didn't quite know what bucket I could fit into that felt aligned, and also felt like um, it was easy to categorize and easy to essentially market myself. It's probably the easiest way to put that. The easiest way to market myself. In the meantime, I have been helping people launch their podcasts. I have a degree in broadcasting. I've got a ridiculous amount of experience in the podcast space. And people have been coming to me behind the scenes, essentially, and asking me, can you help me launch my podcast? And I would do it over and over and over again. I've been doing this since 2019. And some of the biggest and most beloved podcasts in the world started from my little program. And so I've been doing this kind of undercover, not really keeping it out front. And so I came to a point where I'm like, okay, this keeps coming up. This podcast thing keeps coming up, coming up, coming up, coming up. I think I need to double down and go all in on that. And that's what I'm doing. And so, as there's been this massive amount of change, I also feel like as I've been doing everything right, do you know what I mean by that? Like doing everything right? Everything right is in like, I'm taking the classes, I am taking the courses, I'm hiring the coaches, I am doing the work. And also continuously working on me, right? Like even my days are kind of built around to optimize like that my body and my mind are taken care of. And like I work out all the time, I go to yoga, I do hit training, I do dance, I love hiking, I love being outdoors. Especially being in nature and in motion, I'm one for nothing else. That's all I just love. And so I got to a point where I have been doing all the things, like I'll meditate in the morning, I'll even do breath work, and I'm starting to learn about what tapping is. I've got amazing coaches and amazing support. But it felt like there was a ceiling. It felt like there was a ceiling every time. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm trying everything, but I can't seem to get to the root of it. I cannot figure out where the root is so I can pull it out, right? Where is the miss? And so if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that my nature or my pattern is that I'll try all the traditional things. And once all the traditional things kind of don't work, I end up finding the answers in the metaphysical. And really, when I get quiet to myself, that's when all the answers really do start coming in. And so that I really, really trust had recommended that there is this pair of women that have essentially a temple that they are creating around psilocybin, around psychedelic assisted therapy. And I heard so many great things about these two, that they are people that facilitate the environment, but they do not interfere as much as possible. They want to make sure they create the container for you to get the absolute most out of it in the safest, most loving, most amazing environment. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I kissed my family goodbye on a Friday, and I decided to do a solo journey under their care overnight. And so I went there, and they were so amazing. They were so tuned in and tapped in to me, which, believe it or not, I'm not used to. And even after all of this experience, we went for a walk in their neighborhood. And, I immediately got into my interview mode, because the two of them are so freaking fascinating and interesting and have this incredible lives. And so I started asking them questions. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. What is it like? What is it like doing this work? How do you keep yourselves together? How do you, like you have to hold space for such heavy things. And, they asked me, like, who asked you those questions? And I was like, oh, nobody does. I always ask the questions because it keeps me in control. So we'll put a pin on that. I'll get back to the experience. One of the things that I really, really loved about this particular experience, they talked to me for hours before we even did the ceremony. And they wanted to make sure I understood, what to expect, right? And to invite whatever happens. Everything is the right thing, even if it doesn't feel entirely, pleasant all the time. I think they say in the psilocybin journeys that you don't always get what you want, but you will always get what you need. And so I had created some intentions, and my intention was, help me find the root of wherever this, what is the word? Like, help me find the root of wherever this discontent lies. Like, I feel like I have so much. Why isn't it enough? Why can't I just be happy with what I have? I have everything I need, right? Why isn't it enough? So there is that like friction. And so I said, help me find the root. That was my intention for this. And I just left it at that. And they actually brought the mushrooms out, and they told me there were 3 different types of mushrooms. Each had their own function. And so they told me exactly where it was sourced, who it was sourced by. They told me exactly what it would do and what the measurement of each one was. And what they called it, or what it's called, is a heroic journey. So when I had done the psychedelic assisted therapy before, I think it's like something like 2 grams, which is almost like a catharsis. It's supposed to be a catharsis. Like, it's supposed to be a relief. This one was more than twice that. And the heroic journey um, is designed to like crack you at your foundation, like to leave you as a changed person. And I was like, that's what I want. I don't want any more relief, a temporary relief. Like, I want to break the frame. I want to break the frame, and I want to continue to move forward with it. One of the other things that I loved about how they shared is they showed, like, on a scale of all of the drugs that can be used, the ones that were the most addictive, which was heroin, and the ones that were the very least was psilocybin. And it was like all the way in the bottom left corner, where heroin was all the way in the top right corner of the most addictive. So that was interesting. I'd never known that. So I went to do the journey, and they put on some like really nice nature sounds. It was very calming. Had my own room, and they said, if you need anything, just knock. If you and we'll come and get you whatever you need. If you want somebody to sit with you, we're happy to do that. If you want somebody to hold your hand, we're happy to do that. Generally speaking, we don't touch unless there is consent. And if there is, it's only from the clavicle up, or your hand with consent. But otherwise, we don't, unless there is some type of danger with it. And then obviously we're going to take care of you the best we can. And I love the care, and I love the intention that they put behind the way this experience was. And they're like, we're going to come and check on you. If there's anything you need, we're going to be right downstairs. And happy trails. And so I get so nervous. I get so unbelievably nervous during these things. I'm nervous that it's not going to work. I'm not going to understand. I'm not going to get it. I'm nervous that I am going to be sick or something weird is going to come out. I'm nervous, you know? And I have noticed that I've had more nausea in general lately. And so during this whole experience, I had nausea the entire time. And that is not uncommon, at least for me in the few times that I've done it before. I've always been kind of sick to my stomach, but never purged, just kind of sick, right? And this one was pretty intense to the point where it was like, man, this doesn't feel that great, right? I didn't get a ton of imagery, but I started to notice there were a couple of themes that come out, and there was one image in general. There were two kind of things that I really, really remember. And one of them was that I was in a room and I was like white as a ghost. I was in a room and I was white as a ghost. And it was all white room. And there were people all around the perimeter, and the people were in color. And I could see my kids like popping up, my husband, and they were all on the outside of the room. And I looked at me and I thought how lonely I felt. Like I didn't know how to bring those people to me. And I felt a sadness. I felt almost like a grief around why it felt so lonely. And then I remember thinking that if one of the gals came in and said, "Do you need a hand?" I wish they did, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to be a burden, or I didn't know that I really needed it. So I just kind of stayed within, stayed autonomous. And I remember also, I could see my brain. This was kind of interesting because, they say when you do psychedelics, you're actually seeing the universe, you're seeing the truth in the universe, and you're connected. And I could see my brain going from idea to idea, just bouncing like a ping pong ball. Bing, 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 bing. And I remember saying, oh, that's just how my brain works. I was late diagnosed with ADHD. And I could hear me also talking to myself in my head going, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That idea doesn't matter either. That thought doesn't matter. That thought doesn't matter. But I'm going to obsess over it anyway. And I'm like, oh. And so as I was going through this, those were kind of the main things in the session of this experience. And, towards the end, I was still feeling so sick. And I'm like, oh, I'm done. Is it done? I don't even know. And eventually they came in and, asked how I'm doing. And I'm like, am I done? And they're like, I don't know. Are you? And eventually I got up and went downstairs and felt really woozy. And they were so kind and gracious and just gave me space. And, I started telling them that it was, there were a lot of challenging themes that had come up. And they're like, okay, tell me more. Just tell me, and I love that they didn't interpret it. They didn't try and interpret it. They didn't, they just allowed me to talk. And we talked for hours. We talked for hours. And the themes that came up were control, power, loneliness, isolation, grief, guilt, and deep shame, as well as being present. Those are tough, right? I mean, when I was thinking about all of these themes and I was explaining it to them, they're like, you had a shadow dive. I was like, what's a shadow dive? It's like, the shadow dives are the shadows, right? Like that's where your brain is kind of experiencing. And so we ended up talking for hours. And right after this, I thought was so wild. Right after, when I'm starting to talk, I started getting really emotional and started crying and crying and crying. And one of them was like, Allison, do you want to just lay your head down and just cry? And I was like, yeah. And so I did. And it felt so good because I don't generally cry. Not that I'm too proud to cry, I feel like, if it comes up, my body just all of a sudden is like, look it back, and I'm not even, like trying not to cry. I think there's like this big protection that happens. And then, and then I was like, I still feel really nauseous. Like at first it started to get better. They had fresh berries and fresh fruit, and they had like this hearty soup. When you do those psychedelics, you are told not to eat for hours before it happens, like hours and hours, 4 or 5 hours. And what you eat before that is supposed to be pretty light and healthy and, kind of whole foods. So I certainly did that. And I just was so nauseous where the thought of food was just like, oh. And so they got up and was like, you know what? I'm going to give you a ginger drink to help you with your nausea. It'll help you calm your nausea. I was like, okay. So I drank it, and immediately, blah, immediately I threw up. And so I ran up to the bathroom and like barfed. And it was, oh, it was magic. Oh my God, it was magic. You don't realize how much you store in your body, right? And a lot of times those things that you store in your body, they are tension, they are nausea, they are stomach aches, they are, chest hurt, pains in your chest or headaches, that they manifest in so many different ways. And I think that nausea has just kind of been building of like something isn't right, like something has just got to go. um and it felt so cathartic. It felt like such an incredible release. I was so grateful for it. And I remember telling the girls, like, I don't want tonight to end. Like, I don't want to go to sleep because I haven't been, I haven't been, I don't know if this sounds weird and kind of selfish, but like, I haven't been paid attention to like this in so long, and asked these really thoughtful questions. And it felt so good to be in such a loving environment, one that was truly of service. And we had such interesting conversations about them. And, I mentioned we went on a couple-mile walk around the neighborhood after. It was like 10 at night. And it was so nice. It was just so nice. So we got to bed. I went to bed at 12:30. Usually I do not sleep well after those at all. I don't sleep well at all. And the next morning they made like a really delicious, thoughtful breakfast, and we talked some more, and then I was back home. And usually after those things, like the next day I am spent. I am spent, spent, spent. And finally went to bed, and I was like, everything still feels really murky. Maybe it'll be clearer tomorrow. And my goodness, it sure was. It was clear as the bell what the message was through this. And honestly, it was so clear that root that I've been trying to find, and that root of like, what can I pull out, is loneliness. And the reason why I'm pausing is because I have a lot of people in my life. I have a lot of love in my life. I have my family. And this is where like the guilt and gratitude, I talk about this a lot, comes up, because I feel like people like me, people that have are high performing, have a lot. And that question of like, I have so much, why can't this be enough? And so there's a lot of guilt and shame that you want more, and it's kind of like we've been told and almost sold a bill of goods, right? About like the bill of goods, that if you work hard and you work at the corporate job and you save your money and you invest in the 401k and do all the right things and get married and have the kids and buy the house and whatever, that you're going to be on easy street forever. And that's just not the case. And I think that there is much more to fulfillment than following some prescribed plan that is not a one size fits all. And I think people that listen to this show understand that profoundly, where you don't really fit in any box, and when you feel like you are stuck in a box, that is when that tension is there. And you're like, well, how do I break out of this? How do I create my own box? How do I feel more aligned? And so when I woke up the next day, it became so clear that the root was the loneliness aspect of this. And I'll give a little sidebar that I've been working with this amazing coach. Her name is Dara. If you want her information, DM me. She's just magnificent. And on our first meeting, we were talking about business. So she's like a business and life coach. And I thought she was so astute in this that, I did an intake form and I was talking about the state of friendships. This will all come together and I'll explain why. This is kind of a rambly podcast episode, isn't it? But I hope you're still here. I'm grateful that you are. Dara had asked me about like business and money and, like, what is it that I want to earn? What is it that I want to do? What is it that I want business to look like? But she also kind of picked up on the personal relationships in my life. And this is where things are going to get really personal, is that I carry a lot of guilt and shame over my friendships. And what's interesting about me, maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not, I don't know, but I am somebody that is very gregarious and outgoing. And I have a lot of friends, a lot of people that I really, really like and enjoy, and I'm proud to have in my circle and proud to know. And they're freaking awesome people. But I've also noticed a pattern that there are people that I've gotten very, very close to, that I've wanted to get closer to, that are no longer in my life. People that I have called my best friend. And I've mentioned this before, but all of the people in my life that I've called my best friend, I talk to exactly 0 of them today. And I carry a lot of guilt about that. And it wasn't that anything in particular, like any weird blow up happened. It just kind of fizzled. And as I look back and realized, yeah, those were not the right people for me long term. But at the time, they were magnificent and life changing, you know? And then things changed. And so I think because I had been so deeply hurt by people that I had tried to pursue deeper friendships with, but it wasn't met with the same enthusiasm. It wasn't met with the same motivation to continue the relationship on a deeper way. I think the messaging got a little bit tangled up for me, where I started to like just be the pleasant, happy, helpful, you know, person, hopefully delightful. I don't think I'm somebody, I think I'm somebody that is generally well liked. And that might be by design, that I don't want to get too close or, just be a burden to anybody, just be somebody that can be helpful, and be happy, like you be happy that I'm around when I'm around. And then when I'm not, and realize that there was a lot missing there. And so Dara, who is so astute, had said in our very first meeting, hey, I know you want to talk about business and all the things that you're working on now, but I noticed this thing about friendships, and they're always interconnected. Do you want to start there? And wow, she totally got it. She totally got it. And when I started to peel the layers back with my my MO, my modus operandi, I realized how I have even pushed my family away. So while I'm grappling with all of these feelings of loneliness, of worthiness, and, like theoretically, intellectually, I get that I am worthy and confident and all the things that you see on the outside, but there are a lot of layers underneath there that I think is what high achievers and people that are high performers are continuously overproving their worth in every room that they're in. And that, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I've spoken with enough people like me where that it tends to be a common theme. And I started to realize how profoundly I have done this in my own home, because I realized that my kids, who are freaking awesome, they're happy children, they're healthy kids, they are delightful. And my husband, who I think hung the moon, like he just, I always joke that if we were to ever get divorced, it would 100% be my fault, because he's amazing. Like he just, I can cry just thinking about my husband and the relationship that I have with them. But I think somewhere deep down, I can't believe I'm telling you this, but the feelings that I have deep down are like, I don't want them to see me fall apart or see me wrestle and grapple through all of these feelings where it's very clear I'm in an arc, right? Like anyone that's going through a reinvention, anyone that's going through a massive change, whether it's career, whether it's family, whether it's divorce, whether it is a move, whether it is a change in your identity, whatever that looks like, you're in an arc. There is no way that it is like you easily just step off this platform and you're on this platform and it's smooth sailing, right? Especially when you get to a certain age, there are a lot of implications that happen with changes like this. And I have been doing something, a type of breath work in the morning. And I've never done breath work before. In fact, I fucking hate breath work. I hate it. It makes me anxious. It makes me, and it's supposed to, right? It's supposed to actually um, it's supposed to bring up all of the stuck emotions and kind of move them out. Um, there's like gunshots in the back. I don't know if you can hear it. I don't know if they're gunshots or somebody's hunting, out in the mountains. But there are, yeah. So with this breath work, so I've been doing it every morning. And what I've noticed is that every morning I cry, like I'm on my back and tears are coming out. It's not like sobbing boo hoo, but like I could tell the energy is moving, you know, like all of this stored, stuck energy is coming out my eyes. And I'm like, okay, great. But I could feel myself wanting to cry and wanting to wail and wanting to make sounds. But because I do it so early in the morning, I don't want to wake my family up. And so, it is like this weird dance of like, wait a minute, why can't I let them see that I might be, I don't know if struggling is the word, but I am. I'm struggling through a big change, a big transformation. And I've been trying so hard to do it in the pockets of time where they're not going to be burdened, where they're not going to notice. I don't want to interrupt their joy and their happiness and their contentment. And, even my husband had said, honey, you're like the least happy person in our house. I'm like, you're right. And that's fucked up. And so this loneliness thing, this control of everything around me, and the loneliness part of like not letting anybody in, even my family, has been really groundbreaking for me. And so one of the questions that the ladies had asked me in this ceremony, they said, what is the wisdom that came through? And that wisdom was, let them in, let them in, let them in. And it requires a new level of vulnerability. And, is so weird is because when I do this podcast, I feel like I'm never short for like deep conversations because I have you. Like we're talking, we're in conversation on this podcast every single week, in the depths of all of that. And half the time I feel like I'm like bleeding out anyway and being like, all right, warts and all. But I don't know that it is the real stuff. And so part of the ask of me and of God for me is like, help me go to the bones, help me go to the foundation, help me be clear. And the reason why I'm in this mountain house is because I have a dear friend who lent me her house. It's just beautiful, it's exquisite. If I could show you, it's just amazing that I could be here solo and just not feel guilty and not feel ashamed and not be interrupted. And I can work and I can go hike and I can be in nature and I can talk to you and record this podcast episode and not feel like I'm trying to fit everything in. So I'm grateful for generous friends. But I think part of the message also is asking for help. You know, I've shared with people, kind of did this thing where I was at a sound bath with all these amazing people, these like high performing women, people that I didn't really know. And I was at this event, and the facilitator had asked, what if, why don't we go around and say, what is one thing that we could talk about forever? Or you can, kind of share what's on your mind or whatever, and, what you do, and that's it. And so I was trying to think of like something clever or whatever. And then when they got around to me, I said, you know what? I'm looking for a best friend this year. And the whole room just went, oh, oh. And I would see people nodding their heads, understanding, and going, me too. I want that too. And it made me realize like I think a lot of us struggle with loneliness. And, when you climb a ladder of success and trying to get to a place of comfort and enoughness, you deprioritize your friends in service of your family, of work, of community, of obligations. And I think I think there needs to be more of an intentional focus on what that could look like to let people in. And so a lot of people have asked about, I've gotten to know a lot of those people that were in that room that day and started to develop some real deep friendships, and ones that I'm excited to learn more and grow deeper with. Like friendships don't happen like, all right, we're best friends. Okay. That's it. Like it requires time. And I think one of the biggest lessons here is that nothing happens, like this whole world is predicated on shortcuts and hacks and quick fixes. And I think that is why we feel so much discontent, because it isn't quick fixes. It's like, there's such amazing birds here. It isn't quick fixes. This is the long game. This is playing the long game. It takes years. Takes years to build incrementally, bit by bit, by bit, by bit, by bit, by bit. And the same goes for friendships. The same goes for relationships. Like I sat my family down after this and I was like, I need to talk to you, that the reason why I went away, because I didn't really explain to my kids why I was gone, for that psilocybin thing. And I was like, I have been dealing with some really, really big feelings, and I wanted to experience some plant medicine to help me kind of unpack where that came from, because I've been feeling a little sad and I am trying to work through it. And so they had a lot of questions about it, but it felt good to like be honest and not try and have it all together. And even when I've gotten together with some of these new girlfriends, and they would always comment about like, that was really something that you had shared about the best friend thing. And I would explain to them, like, I've got people that if I'm angry about something, which is generally the first emotion that I feel anyway, is straight to anger. I know who to call. If I need help with like a business question, I know who to call. If I need help with like who's a good handyman, like I know who to call. But if I'm sad, I don't have anyone to call. I mean, I can talk to my husband, but you know, he's amazing. But you need more, right? Like it takes a village. We were not meant to put um all of our needs on one person. And so that's been kind of the awakening here, is to let people in, to be more vulnerable, to release control. And releasing control is I'm really good at like controlling shit and planning everything and trying to kind of put everything in place. And one of the reasons why I have this podcast and why I care so deeply about podcasting in general, and I'm literally doing this full time where I'm a podcast launch strategist, is because having your own podcast allows you to unpack your ideas, your thoughts, your curiosities in a long form content where you get to connect with other people that need what you have to say or to offer. And I feel endlessly grateful for the past 6 years of doing this podcast and having you there on the other side listening. Maybe you are driving right now. Maybe you're cleaning your house or doing the laundry. Maybe you're sitting on the toilet. I don't know. Maybe you're doing your makeup and listening. But man, it's so intimate to have these relationships that I get to build from having these meaningful conversations, having amazing people on the podcast, and teaching other people how to grow their reputation and their awareness. And again, it kind of comes back to the more we share, the less we hide. A lot of times we are the best kept secret, right? Like we're hiding in plain sight. And the podcast I found is the best way for people to know that there's relief and that you're on the other side of it. It's pretty interesting. So if you have been considering a podcast and are trying to figure out, how do I make this work? Can I make it work with my time, my energy, with my ideas? I invite you to book a call with me. You can go to AllisonHare.com/free call. It is free, as the name states. And again, if you want to just know more and you're not on my email list, I send out a weekly personal email. They're usually short and pretty punchy, snarky too, with some bonuses at the end. You can go to AllisonHare.com/email. But I want to thank you for this time. I have no idea how long I've been talking, and I'm hoping that this audio has gone through. But I'm grateful for you and would love to hear you. Send me a DM if any of this hit, or if anybody is interested in learning more about psychedelic assisted therapy. They can always DM me, or please share this message. But I want you to spread your arms wide, use your voice, let them in. And thank you for hanging with me in the reinvention room. I'll see you next time.